All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Senator Bob Casey's Drive-In Town Hall. Thank you for being here. My name is Ify Aduba. I'm a longtime resident of Bucks County, about 25 plus years doing a lot of community benefit work with nonprofits and for-profits alike, and just generally a fan of the opportunity to come out and support events like this one and have conversations like this with the great residents of the county and our elected officials. So thank you all for being here. Before we get started, I'll go over a few quick ground rules for the event. As this is a drive-in town hall that's taking place outside, people can remain in your vehicles. There was a radio station that it's broadcast on that I did not get. 88.3. All right, thank you, people. So you can listen in your vehicles. We are asking people to remove masks only if you're either me or the senator. So please keep your masks on. We want to be as safe as possible here today and keep a distance from everyone. The senator wants to get to as many questions as possible today, so we're going to try to do our best to do just that. He's going to start with a few opening remarks, talking to us about the outlook and climate in Washington, the work he's doing for everyone and across the state of Pennsylvania, some of those issues that he's paying really close attention to. Then we'll take some questions from the audience and from a few folks who couldn't be here with us today and submitted some questions online. The goal and intention is to be informative and allow everyone to be heard firsthand by Senator Casey. So please respect both the senator and everyone around you. We don't want a ton of shouting or any profanities or anything unruly. We're going to grant all of you some respect, and we're going to ask you to do the same for us and with each other. As you can see, there is some media here, and I believe you would have been informed of that as you came in, so expect that you are consenting to the use of your image. If you don't want your image used, you don't want people to know you were here, this is the ideal time to excuse yourself from the event. I think that covers all of the housekeeping. So without further ado, I welcome Senator Bob Casey.
Well, thanks very much. Ify, thank you for being here tonight. We were kidding earlier backstage that after tonight, because you've been the MC, you will then be a professional MC, and you can just take that on the road if you'd like.
Spread the word. My rates are going up.
Told her she has to charge for it. No, but in a very serious vein, I want to thank Ify for not just being here tonight for us, but for the great work that she does throughout this county, helping families and women throughout every community in this county. And you don't need to go very far in this county to realize not only is it a big county by way of population, at last count over 626,000 people and growing all the time, but Bucks County obviously is one of the largest geographically. So a lot of places to go to help people, and we're grateful for her leadership. I just thought I'd spend just a few minutes just commenting on a few matters that we're dealing with in Washington, but I wanted to start very much here in the county to make note of and to note as well the solidarity that we feel with the people of this county, especially after the terrible events just in the last couple of days where a lot of people's lives were turned upside down by either storms or tornadoes or some combination thereof. And I know it happened not too long ago, earlier in the summer in July. So I want you to know a couple things. Number one is we're going to continue, I will and my office will, both here in Pennsylvania and our folks in Washington, continue to advocate on behalf of the people of Bucks County. And of course that goes for other communities throughout the state. Montgomery County got hit hard, so did the city of Philadelphia, but a lot of smaller communities throughout the state. We're going to continue to advocate for you to get the help that you need in the near term, and of course that's driven by the declaration that the governor and his team have been working on to seek assistance from the president from a declaration that would trigger help. But also we want to help in the intermediate term and long term. It's one of the reasons why we have to pass the infrastructure bill, which, as you know, has passed through the Senate, but not through the House yet. But longer term, we've got to confront the challenge of climate change. And that's what the second bill is about. You've heard a lot about these bills. The infrastructure bill, which, as I said, passed the Senate, not through the House yet. But then the Build Back Better budget bill, which is next, which is really, you'll hear a lot about lowering costs for families by investing in child care, keeping the child tax credit payments at a robust level that they're at now, as well as making investments in pre-kindergarten education, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, advancing policy on home and community-based services for seniors and people with disabilities, and to lift up that heroic essential workforce. But in addition to all of that and more, of course, this Build Back Better budget bill is about making the investments, putting in the tax strategies that will allow us to combat climate change, and all while doing that, create millions of good-paying jobs, and we hope union jobs when all is said and done. So there's a lot on the agenda, but it's directly connected to some of the events of just the last couple of days. Let me finally say one other thing, and then I want to open it up for our questions. One of the overarching goals of this Build Back Better budget proposal that we hope to be voting on, I hope we can say we're going to vote on it, if not late September, that seems unlikely, but certainly in the first part of October. But one of the big investments there will be investments in the lives of our children. All kinds of investments by the federal government that the federal government's really never made before, or never made at this level. And what I'm proud of and what I'm watching very carefully is how those investments will mirror or match some of the proposals that I set forth way back in early 2020, way back in February of 2020, when I was announcing my 5 freedoms for America's children. The freedom to be healthy, the freedom to have economic security, the freedom to learn, the freedom from hunger, and the freedom to be safe from harm. The 5 freedoms that every American child, and when I say every, I mean every single one, should have the opportunity to enjoy those 5 freedoms. If they are the beneficiaries of those 5 freedoms, they can succeed in life, with rare exception. But unfortunately, too many American children, not just here in Lower Bucks County, or in Scranton where I live, or in Pittsburgh or other places, big cities, small towns, rural areas, suburban communities, wherever you go, too many children are the beneficiary of maybe one of those 5 freedoms, or 2, and sometimes 0. And that's not the America that we say we are, not the America that we say that we want to be. So if we're going to be consistent with our values, or the values that we espouse, we will invest in our children. And almost any national goal that we have, domestic or otherwise, is directly tied to whether or not we're going to make these investments in our children. National security, it starts with children. Economic security, having the highest, the most skilled workforce in the world. Taking on the challenge of defeating the Communist Party in China when they're cheating on trade deals and cheating in so many ways, and not allowing our workers to have a level playing field. That all starts with investments in our children. So I don't care what issue you're talking about, whether it's GDP growth or anything else, it starts with these investments in our children. A lot of them will be continued or realized for the first time in this Build Back Better budget bill that we're going to be voting on pretty soon. So in addition to lowering costs for families, we're going to be making investments in children and families. So we appreciate you being here tonight. And with that, I'll stop talking and listen to questions. And if it's okay, if you don't mind saying your name, you don't need to give me your last name, maybe just your first name when you come up. And certainly when you're at the microphone, I know maybe I'm violating the rule. It's okay to take your mask off to ask the question, right?
It's okay to take your mask off,
Yeah.
Ted. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Sue Ann DeVito, and I'm one of the co-founders of Immigrant Rights Action, and we service Bucks County. And I have to thank you again, because I remember when the last administration came in and put in a Muslim ban, you were down there at the airport in a Saturday night in your tux fighting for families. I also really appreciate everything you're doing for children, and my question is, there are so many children who have undocumented parents, and they don't have access to the same things that all of the other children do. And they're also negatively impacted every day that the fear of their parents being deported. So where do you stand on a pathway to citizenship for all?
Did you
And
say
thank you.
Sue Ann? Sue Ann, thank you very much for the question. Number one is I support it, and we need to make sure a pathway to citizenship is part of a larger immigration reform effort. It has been ever elusive as a goal. We thought we were getting there, which seems like 1,000 years ago, but it was only 2013 when 68 members in the United States Senate voted on the most far-reaching progressive immigration reform legislation, what we then called comprehensive immigration reform. But it never got a vote in the House for lots of political reasons. The Republican majority in the House would not even put it up for a vote, which was a tragedy. And we really have not gotten to that point again. The unfortunate part today is that I don't think we could get the same number of votes in the U.S. Senate, unfortunately, because the Republican Party in the Senate, and I'm going to just say this, I know some don't like us making political assessments, but they are not the party they were in 2013 in terms of their willingness to embrace the idea of immigration reform. In fact, some of the folks who brought it about in the Republican Party are still there, but they're backing away from it. And people like John McCain, of course, who passed away, are no longer there. But I do believe that we have virtual unanimity on our side, and I'm hoping that we can take some positive steps in the right direction on immigration in this Build Back Better budget plan. The limitation is this is a very narrow pathway because it's a reconciliation bill that can only come about because 50 Democrats, we have to work between and among ourselves to get this done. But there's a possibility that we can make some progress up, or advance, I should say, in the direction of progress on immigration reform in this bill. And that would be good for the country. It would be good for all of us to have a much more orderly process and to give those children that you cited at least some peace of mind that their mom or their dad is going to be treated fairly in this process. So we hope we can make progress in this, but if we don't, then we have to figure out another way to get it done. Immigration reform is essential, I think, not just for human dignity, but also for economic security and economic growth.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Senator Casey.
Hi.
My name is Colleen, and I'm
Colleen.
a teacher. I also have my boys with me in the car. You guys want to wave? You can pop your hand out.
Oh, right there. Okay.
They're right there.
They're in the front
They
row
wanted
of
to come
cars.
up, but we're keeping safe. So, ultimately, I just want to thank you for your support of public schools and children in general. And here's my question. I'm a teacher in Pennsbury School District.
Uh-huh.
Many of our buildings, and not just mine, but in the neighboring school districts nearby, are 50 years or older, and they are in desperate need of renovations, as well as high bandwidth to keep up with the technological demands. How much of the infrastructure reconciliation allotment will actually go to public schools for those items?
Well, Colleen, I'd start by saying I'll start with a negative. Unfortunately, my short answer would be not enough. What did not happen in this infrastructure bill, because of the nature of how it was passed. You had this was a pathway that was bipartisan. So I want to make sure Democrats get a little extra credit here. 50 Democrats and only 19 Republicans in the Senate. But 19's better than 0, like they were on the rescue plan, and what they're likely to be on the Build Back Better. That's a little commercial there for the breakdown in votes, but because it was bipartisan, by definition, there were limits to how high the number would go and also the number of policies addressed. So there wasn't the kind of robust investment in school buildings that we would want, repair and rebuilding and the like. Now there's a substantial broadband investment, which is positive for schools, and that should help significantly. There's also, in the upcoming bill, an effort to make sure that as we're putting in place policies to tackle climate change, that we can have investments in school buses that can be part of the clean energy strategy as well to keep emissions down. But I would say candidly, there's not enough in the infrastructure bill to get to the school repairs you're talking about. Now, a group of Democrats, I'm one of them, but it's a long list of Democrats in the Senate, have supported a bill that Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island has been putting forth for years to make a huge commitment to a school infrastructure. So I would say not enough, but there's some dollars in there, and we want to make sure that when those dollars are available, that we're using every possible means to get those dollars to schools and school buildings in Pennsylvania. But thank you for being a public school teacher. And there it is. I love public schools. That's a great advertisement. Thanks so much for your question. Thanks for the work you do.
Thank you.
Hi, Senator. My name is Kirsten. I'm with Indivisible Bucks County. And I have to admit, I am terrified with what's going on with voter suppression in the states.
Yeah.
And so I'd love it if you could give us an update on what's been happening across recess related to the filibuster, and also if you've been working with any of your colleagues who might be a little reluctant on that topic.
Well, Kirsten, thanks, and thanks for working with Indivisible. I think that it was the first year of Indivisible, 2017. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, I've never seen more activism by people across the board, maybe even more so among women across our state, and more determination to stop bad things from happening and to advance a positive, progressive agenda. But I want to thank you for that, and I know you haven't stopped, even though the presidency changed hands. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I think the short answer on making what I think we will have to do to get a voting rights bill done, I think the short answer is we're going to have to change the Senate rules. That's the real impediment right now, because we got some clarity, and I know this is not a huge. If to use a football analogy, this didn't bring us 80 yards down the field, but I think we picked up some yards by advancing a Democratic consensus voting rights proposal, right? Because we had some disagreement between and among a few senators on the Democratic side. They got together, worked out an agreement, and then they sought input from all of the voting rights organizations around the country. And we finally had consensus such that we could vote in the Senate, and we got 50 Democrats to agree to advance voting rights legislation, and yet we couldn't get help from the other side. So I think it was a moment of real clarity that unless we change the Senate rules in some fashion, either to do away with the 60-vote rule or to alter it in some fashion to allow, we're not asking for much, we're just asking for voting rights to get a vote. And last time I checked, 51 is a majority. So I would say that we have, at this stage right now, as we stand here on September the 9th, I don't think we've made enough progress yet within our caucus to get those votes to change the rules, but it is a work in progress, and people are doing some work on this every day. But we have a lot of work to do ahead to get to the point where we can alter the rules enough to make the change that will allow us to have voting rights be fortified by a vote of 51 senators, or 50 plus Vice President Harris. Thank goodness she's there to break a tie. but I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're making good progress.
Thank you for your continued advocacy on the topic of voting rights.
Thank you, and thanks for working on it.
How you doing, Senator? My name's Dan O'Brien, and I'm from Bristol, right here.
Uh-huh.
I'm a father of 2 young kids, including one 7-week-old that's in the car right now.
Wow.
Not
Dan,
by herself. My wife's there as well, but yeah.
So she's less well rested than you are, right? Are you doing some of the work?
I'm doing some work. Not
Good.
not as much as she is, obviously, because she's just
Good.
a better person. But no, as you know, based on your previous legislation and what you're working on now, access to early education and also really access to affordable childcare for working families has been a huge issue, not only here in Lower Bucks County, but across the country for a long time. And the pandemic has only thrown a spotlight on that even more, where our children are just really falling behind at an earlier age. And as we can see from the numbers, a lot of working parents still are not able to find affordable access to high quality childcare. And a lot of them still haven't returned to work because of that reason.
Right.
And I know it's a part of the legislation that's being talked about now. What can we do to make sure that a roadblock is not thrown in the way of these investments currently, but also long-term to make sure that universal pre-K and access to affordable childcare for working families is a staple of our culture?
Yep. No, Dan, great questions. And I think the short answer is put as much pressure as you can on the United States Senate for the next 2 months at least. Because this, and I keep referring to it, and I will, this Build Back Better budget bill provides that opportunity. Universal pre-K for all 3- and 4-year-olds in the country, that's what the president proposed, and we're trying to effectuate that in this bill, as well as investments in child care at the federal level that have never really been made. Now, we did make some good progress on child care in the rescue plan, where Democrats voted to provide $130 billion to open schools safely. That's why schools can open, because we voted the right way. We voted as well for a lot of money, tens of billions for vaccinations. That's how we can deal with the Delta variant or other variants that might arise. But we also advanced the ball on the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, the child and dependent care tax credit, which actually pays for, or helps families, I should say, pay for the cost of child care. In addition to that kind of really what is a child care tax credit, we also in the rescue plan made investments in child care more broadly, about $39 billion in child care investments. But a lot of this investment is short term. We want to continue that, and so we're trying to do that in this next bill. Senator Patty Murray, who's from the state of Washington, she has been working on these issues for years, as I have and a number of us. She wants to do a couple things when it comes to child care, not just make it more affordable for families by keeping the cost of it low as a percent of your income, but also to make sure that providers get help and that we're really in a very determined fashion making the investments that we need to make. In my proposal that I mentioned before, the 5 freedoms for America's children, under the third one, freedom to learn, I've proposed big investments in Head Start. I'm proposing an additional $18 billion for Head Start and an additional $7 billion for one segment of the child care funding, the so-called funding that goes to the states. So those are the kinds of investments we're going to have to make over time. And this bill coming up it might be the best opportunity we'll have on child care investments in families, and investments in pre-kindergarten education, so-called early care and learning. So whatever you can do to move as many senators in that direction would be very helpful.
All right, we'll keep working at it.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Best of luck with your new baby.
Good luck with the baby, Dan. Everybody's, I assume, still out there paying close attention. Nobody's changed the station. I assured the senator that nobody in Bucks County would change the radio station while they were listening. Hopefully everybody's paying close attention. We're going to take a question that was submitted to us online. It's just a teeny tiny question. So we know time's limited and you're going to do your best to answer and kind of speak to this, but what are some of your ideas and plans around combating systemic racism?
Well, it's a great question, and it's unfortunately a long answer, but I'll try to shorten it. I think part of what we've got to do, and I know this is true for me as a human being, but also as a public official, is to recognize the reach, and no one wants to. None of us really want to admit this, but I think we have to start admitting it, that we've got systemic racism that infects and affects or has an impact on virtually every system in our society. We've seen in graphic display the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. That's probably what people are most aware of and maybe most conscious of. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. We've got systemic racism problems in our healthcare system, our education system, housing, and even in these discussions about climate change. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do on climate change is not just to put forward the tax incentives and other strategies to lower emissions. Basically, 30-50 is the way to think about it. 50% reduction in emissions by 2030, and that's less than a decade away. But as we're doing that, we're also trying to bring a measure of justice to communities that have been suffering from another kind of racism or systemic racism, which is racism in the sense that we haven't invested enough in those communities, mostly communities of color, that have sometimes the dirtiest air and the dirtiest water and the worst pipes going into their home, and we could make a longer list than that. So part of it is not just to deal with climate change, but to direct the strategy and the benefits to those communities. And the goal is to bring at least 40% of the investments to those communities. So a lot of what we're trying to get done in these next two bills, and especially the second bill, is to recognize that basic problem. Education funding can help rectify some of the disparities in education and some of the racism that we've allowed to persist. I think also just some of these more recent investments, or I should say progress that we made on the child tax credit, that alone helps families that have been often left out. I mean, the tax code itself might be one of the best the best examples we have of a system that was not just catered towards and directed towards benefits for the highest income Americans and huge corporations, but by definition, that created another kind of systemic racism in terms of tax benefits. You know, some people were, I think, mad when we said, well, maybe that family, say, no matter what race they are, but say in communities of color, say the same family was getting an enhanced child tax credit payment in July of 2021 and another check in August and September and through the rest of the year. Maybe that same family was getting food assistance because of the rescue plan. Maybe that same family was also getting other assistance through the rescue plan. And some were mad about that. They thought there was too much going to lower income families and some middle class families. Well, I would say to that, yeah, they are getting that help. It's about time. We're only about 40 years late, because the powerful and the corporate have been getting benefits like that, disproportionately higher benefits, by the way, through the tax code for 40 years. Most families got help in the rescue plan that they've never gotten before. So we're really late in addressing some of these issues, and we're late in recognizing, I think, the systemic racism which has unfortunately affected too many aspects of our society and really, government programs themselves.
Great, thank you. Who is our next question?
Hi, Senator. My name is Kai I'm the Federal Climate Campaign Manager for Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania.
Great.
I also live in Philadelphia.
Can I make sure I pronounce it Kai Mateo?
Kai, my first name's Kai.
Kai, okay.
Yeah.
Kai, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for asking. As a young person and as a resident of Philadelphia, I'm very concerned about climate change.
Yep.
We, of course, saw the terrible flooding with Hurricane Ida. And my question is about the Build Back Better budget, which you have already mentioned. We think that it's very important for us to make sure we have a pathway to create 100% clean energy by 2035, invest in environmental justice, as you were just mentioning, and to create millions of good-paying green jobs. What will you do in your role to ensure that the Build Back Better Act is passed and that it is strong and bold on those critical provisions?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to be strong and bold because of a real consensus in the Democratic Party in the Senate, working with President Biden and Vice President Harris, to make sure that the investments are not just bold and robust, but bold and robust enough to get us to those goals, because you've got to have a kind of a North Star to shoot for when it comes to climate change, because this particular bill, because of the scope of it and because of the potential impact of it, might be kind of the last train leaving the station, in the sense that we've made the right investments, made the right moves to be able to begin to tackle climate change. Because we do reach a point, as you know, probably better than I, because you've dedicated a good part of your life to this. We do reach a point where it'll be too late, and if we don't make the investments here, I think it'll certainly be too late in just a matter of years. So what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we keep a focus not just on the overall number, because some want to bring that number down. We're trying to push back against that, but also to get as much support within the caucus for the entire bill. We all have pieces of it and segments of it and priorities within the bill, but I think that's the goal, to get everyone kind of rowing in the same direction, so to speak, on the entire bill. And that means both the substance of the bill, the policy, plus the investments that we need to make in various component parts, whether it's on climate change and the tax strategies to help us there and other incentives, or whether it's child care over here or home and community-based services over there. But also to make sure that we're using the tax code principally to pay for some of these investments. We had a Republican tax bill way back in 2017, which I didn't vote for and never could vote for it. But one of the failures of that bill wasn't just bad policy that just rewarded the top and didn't really advance the workers' interests or the overall economic interests of the country. But one of the failures there was they didn't have the kind of pay-fors that we're going to try to put in this bill. So it's a little strange to some people that the Democrats are trying to pay for their policy and the Republicans seemed disinterested in that. But I think it's robust, and I'll be interested in your, we actually have a bill to put on the floor. I'll be interested in your assessment of it and staying in touch with you about it.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. And thank you for your work, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take another online question quickly before somebody else from the audience. One of the constituents wrote in, "My parents are in a nursing home and I worry about them, especially after the COVID pandemic highlighted many issues. As the chairman of the Senate Aging Committee, what are you doing to support the needs of residents and workers in nursing homes?"
A couple of things. One is nursing homes as a category of care, what some would call skilled care, congregate care is another way to describe it. The nursing homes and the policy surrounding nursing homes needed attention and work and even funding before COVID, but ever more so in the aftermath of COVID, because so many families, and I'm sure there are some here, either themselves or they knew people, who were cut off from their loved ones in nursing homes because of the virus and how quickly it spread in those congregate settings. And people were pressing their hands against window panes to communicating by phone or iPads or in lots of other ways. But it cut people off, and it wasn't simply that the death number was so high. At last count, that death number was above well above 180,000 Americans. But the tragedy was compounded when some loved ones, seniors in nursing homes, were dying without a loved one nearby because they couldn't get close to them. So because of that whole horrific experience, we've got a lot of work to do. But as I said, this even predated COVID, but even more so still in the grip of, unfortunately, but we hope soon in the aftermath of COVID. So what should we do? Well, a couple of things we should do. We should take an existing program within the federal government, started during the Obama administration, but is still part of the public policy of the federal government, which is called the Special Focus Facility Program, where the Department of Health and Human Services has this program in place to take, or I should say, pay special attention to nursing homes that have continual problems, that are falling below a standard that we should expect. Now, the good news is it's a small number. It's only average about 3.5% of all nursing homes. So it's many hundreds. It's in the range of 500 or more, and that's always, no matter what the number is, it's still too high. But I think we could extend that program a little bit to say, let's not just look at 3.5%. Let's get that number a little higher. So we're paying special attention to nursing homes that are falling below that standard. And Senator Toomey and I have worked together on legislation to do this and to make some changes to that program. But we can't simply have a program or a policy that says this nursing home is doing a bad job and therefore they have to be held accountable. We also have to help them. So we can't say nursing home, do a good job, or those who run the nursing home, do a good job in the middle of the worst pandemic in 100 years, but we're not going to help you with PPE. The federal government failed to provide enough PPE to nursing homes. And even when they provided it, often it was junk, okay? That's not a technical term, but you know what I mean. So the federal government's got to be in the business of not just pointing fingers and holding these facilities accountable. We got to help them. And if helping them means higher reimbursement rates, or helping them means helping with more money for infection control, or more money to invest in staffing, to keep the turnover rate down, to get the best staff possible, we got to do that. But there's much we've got to do together, and as much as I'm trying to break new ground in this upcoming bill on home and community-based services for seniors and people with disabilities, we cannot forget about, and I will never forget about, that other setting called skilled care in nursing homes. So we got a lot of work to do.
Great. Well, our next question is coming up. Everybody still with us? Yes? Perfect.
We can't really tell if they changed the channel, right?
Well, we could just throw out test questions. See.
Hi, Senator.
How are
Good
you?
evening. I'm Eleanor, retired social worker and school counselor. I want to thank you for your wonderful service. You're a great senator. I'm so
Thank you,
happy
Eleanor.
with you. If only we had another one like you when we get the new one. Oh. I had a hard time deciding on a topic, not because there were few, but because there were too many. It's like you have so much on your shoulders, we all do, but you have more power than we do. There's science denial, income inequality, tax cuts for the rich, terrorism, poverty, racism, civil rights, women's rights, and most of all, the big lie. The big lie. Oh, God, the big lie. I meet it every day. Misinformation every day on Facebook and other sites, disseminating false, dangerous information 24 hours a day and not being regulated. Even though they're saying we're working on it. There's awful stuff on there. We've all been faced with friends and family whom we no longer speak to because They watch Fox News, they believe every word they hear, and they want us to believe it. And there's no use even arguing. I usually change the subject because that's the only way to save your face and get them out of your face. The conspiracy theories are absurd, but they're believed by educated and non-educated people. They and Facebook and Fox are the cause of many problems that I listed previously, and many of the problems you talked about tonight. What can we do? What can Congress do? It might seem an off topic, but no, it's like a cloud that just is. Every time I speak to people, 1 out of 6 are telling me something that somebody on Fox TV said that's so untrue. And they swear, if God came down, they would swear to God, this is what I hear and it's true. So what can we do? What can we all do? And what can Congress do? There seems to be no stopping, no matter how gross or how usually untrue they're disseminating. Thank you.
Eleanor, thank you. And you've more than earned the right to ask that question, and it is among the most important questions we have to wrestle with as beyond the Congress, really as a society, as a people. The lie of which you speak is a clear and present danger, in my judgment, to our democracy itself. And there's no more important work of a citizen or a public official than to preserve our democracy. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us, and I would include myself in this, we're probably a little bit too complacent about the strength of our democracy or what undergirds it. And it wasn't as strong as we thought it was. It survived the last year or so after probably the most threatening stress test was applied to it. It survived for a number of reasons. An independent judiciary helped us survive. Judges making independent decisions based upon the law and the facts, not based upon the lie or the theory, the crazy theories behind some of these arguments. You can't even call them legal arguments that were made. Lies that lawyers told over and over again on behalf of the former president. So, at one level, it's the answer is what you're doing tonight is calling attention to the lie, calling it out, and being determined to set the record straight. I think that's an obligation we all have within our own families and communities, and certainly when we have a microphone of one kind or another. There's no question that this whole debate about voting rights is directly connected to all this, because it's my belief that the former president, when he was running, at some point must have decided, and I think the evidence is pretty clear he did, must have decided that he may not win, or maybe he decided he couldn't win, so he was going to start to plant the seeds of the lie long before Election Day. And then he carried it forward after Election Day, and then was so determined to have the lie be embedded into our society that he lied about what the vice president could do on that fateful day of January the 6th, telling his supporters that the vice president could change the result, which we know he couldn't do under the law. He had very much a ministerial role to play that day. But he was willing to create danger around his own vice president to perpetuate the lie, and also direct a lot of venom and vitriol towards other people like Speaker Pelosi and others, not just the vice president. So the continual effort to hold people accountable for what happened on January the 6th is also part of our responsibility, especially those of us who are elected officials. And that's playing out with the January 6th Commission. Thank goodness we have a few Republicans willing to serve on that commission and to tell the truth. But the voting rights core of this is, I think, essential. We have to pass legislation to protect voting rights because of what has transpired over the last year and a half. You have a group of Americans that are followers of the former president who didn't like the result, and in my judgment are engaged in not just voter suppression, but I think voter suppression that is soaked, completely soaked in white supremacy. I think that's what it's about. They don't like the result that they got in the presidential election, and they don't like the result that they got in the state of Georgia when we elected 2 Democratic senators. And they believe that that happened because communities of color, and especially black voters, made it possible. So they are going to engage in a nationwide effort, state by state, to change the voting laws to do what Reverend now Senator Raphael Warnock says, trying to prevent some people, that he said some people are trying to prevent some people from voting. And we all know what that is. It's voter suppression grounded in white supremacy. So changing the dynamic on voting is going to be critical so that everybody gets to vote in a fashion that's best for them. This idea that you have to go to a voting booth only on a particular day, when we know after the tests we went through in 2020 that people can vote by mail, they can vote before election day, they can vote in lots of ways, and do it with integrity and do it in a manner that doesn't in any way change the final result. We had a free and fair election in 2020 that didn't have any of the problems that some have alleged were part of it. So yes, the big lie persists, but I think every day people like you stand up. We're pushing back on allowing that lie to continue to run around the world, so to speak. I think it's slowed down a little bit, but we got to keep after it. So thanks for doing the work you've done.
Read the newspapers, baby, and read good articles and
Yeah, just read
valid
facts, right?
articles,
Yeah.
researched.
Right.
Thank you again, and we'll keep working.
Eleanor, thank you.
Thanks, Eleanor. So a question that came in online, and I'm not going to lie, I've had several people ask me this to make sure that you answer this question. And I can't go home because my brother also called me and said, make sure that he answers this question. In light of everything that's recently happened in Texas, can you tell us a little bit about what you can do to protect the woman's right to choose here in Pennsylvania?
Well, the Texas law, as many of you know, had 2 huge defects. Number one is the law, for the first time, this is a bizarre result for any kind of legislation. The law allows individuals to, in a sense, be their own law enforcement or bounty hunter, to pursue someone and to bring an action against someone who may have been part of the process where a woman is seeking an abortion, whether it's the taxi driver or a family member that helped them or whatever it was. So that's a recipe for disaster, not only in this context, but in a lot of other contexts. So that's objectionable across the board. And the other problem with the proposal is that it didn't have the exceptions that are part of, I think, an American consensus. Now, I've got a record on pursuing policies to reduce the number of abortions. And there are people on both sides of the issue who have tried to pursue policies to do that. One thing we've got to continue to do, and we can advance some of these issues in this upcoming bill, is to make sure that we're at the same time both helping pregnant women, especially those who have a crisis pregnancy, and number 2, doing everything possible to provide not just access, but no-cost access to family planning. And it's nice to say both of those things, but you gotta do something about it if you believe it. That means not cutting funding to Planned Parenthood. That means not cutting funding to the Title X program that we've had in place for years to support family planning. That means making sure the Medicaid program doesn't get cut by hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years, as one of the two political parties, I'll let you guess which one, has proposed. They're not proposing in budget after budget, year after year, in all the years I've been in Washington, or most of those years, cutting Medicaid by a couple tens of billions. They're talking about cutting it by hundreds of billions over the course of 10 years, and that means tens of billions every year. You can't say that you want to help pregnant women if you're not willing to support the Women, Infants, and Children's Program and robust funding for it, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for food assistance, and similar programs like that. So all of those are in furtherance of that goal that I think is widely shared. Last thing I'll tell you is about the mechanics of a law like the law in Texas vis-a-vis Pennsylvania. It's entirely possible that our legislature, controlled in both houses by Republicans, would pass a similar bill. I don't think Governor Wolf would sign it. I think he would veto it, which is a difference from Texas. But I think a lot of Americans want folks in Washington to be focused on help for people at a time of crisis, not finger pointing.
Thank you. I am noticing that we are running out of time, so
Do you want to go another 3 hours?
I could. I ordered pizza.
That's probably
so
a
we
fast
could
way to
just
get
sit
them
here.
to turn the channel. Right?
No, they're loving it. Everybody's enjoying having the conversation, correct? Yes.
It's a very supportive group.
They're in for the whole night.
Can we send pizza to the folks under the tent?
Absolutely, absolutely.
By the way, I didn't acknowledge the presence of Dr. Ganther. Doctor, thank you so much for leading this great community college here in Bucks County. And she is, go ahead. Doctor, you have challenged me to make sure that I visit the other two campuses, right?
Correct.
And my schedules have already been told about that by virtue of just what I just said. But thank you, Doctor, for being with us.
Thank you.
I think you get to close out and share final remarks.
Okay, no more questions. Okay, well, let me take the next 25 minutes. No, I won't do that. I'm only kidding. No, but let me say thanks for the opportunity that this community college gave us for this forum. Obviously, in 1 hour, we can't cover everything, but we covered a range of issues that are critically important not only to the country more broadly, but in particular, folks who live here in Bucks County. In one way or another, each of the issues that have been raised has an impact on everyone who lives in this great county. I want to say this as well. Because of institutions like this community college and other institutions of higher education throughout the county and throughout the region, this region of Pennsylvania, this county in particular and this region overall, I believe is well positioned for the future to be able to invest in our children and our families, to prepare them for the world of work down the road in their careers, and also to continue to build, as you've built a community here in Bucks County. This is a county of tremendous growth, and it's been that way for virtually my entire lifetime, and that's just going to continue, I think, unabated. So there's a bright future, but I know in the way sometimes some of the obstacles are just what people encountered with these terrible, horrific, destructive weather events. So we've all got to be prepared not only to make the right investments in children and families to allow more growth, but also to be responsive when these communities need our help. So we're grateful you're with us tonight. Thanks for staying engaged as citizens at a critical time for our country. We're grateful for your attention and grateful for your presence here tonight. Thank you and God bless. You're now a full-fledged MC, right?